You seek the treasure of Mara, glittering gold. It is yours.
You must choose. But choose wisely.
Don't call me Junior.
Hey, lady, you call him Dr. Jones.
Fortune and glory, kid. Fortune and glory.
This is a castle, and we have many tapestries. And if you are a Scottish lord, then I am Mickey Mouse.
Why are you sitting there resting when we're so near the end? Come on, let's go.
You have chosen wisely.
W Radio, your information station.
What if I told you there was an Indiana Jones mini-land with multiple attractions in the Disney parks that never got built? A land so ambitious, it could have changed everything. Or that Indy once shared the literal stage in Walt Disney World with Luke Skywalker, Princess Leia, and even Mark Hamill himself, but for one night only. And what if I told you there's an entire timeline of Indiana Jones attractions around the world, from stunt shows to dark rides to looping coasters, each with their own secrets, stories, and surprises you probably never knew? Well, this week, we're going on the ultimate adventure as we uncover the full story of Indiana Jones in the Disney parks, the history, the secrets, the trivia, the rides you love, and the ones that never made it to the drawing board. Hello, my friend, and welcome to WDW Radio, your guide to the Disney parks, movies, and experiences from around the world. I am Lou Mongello, and this is show number 834. And whether this is your first episode or you've been with me since the very beginning, welcome home, because for more than 20 years, I've shared my love of Disney here on the podcast through live video, events, cruises, and our amazing community and WDW Radio family, which you are part of. And I am so grateful that you're here, because you're not just a listener, you are part of the family. And this week, I'm joined by former Imagineer, friend and author Jason Surrell, who helped to bring some of Indiana Jones' adventures to life in the Disney parks. And together, we're going to take you inside the temples, stunt shows, concept art, hidden Easter eggs, and special events that have made Indy such an enduring part of Disney history. And whether you're a longtime fan of Indiana Jones or just love a great behind-the-scenes park story, this is a conversation filled with surprises, laughter, and some revelations you probably haven't heard before. And before we get started, don't forget to join the community and conversation over in the WDW Radio Clubhouse at wdwradio.com/clubhouse. Watch and chat this and every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on Facebook and YouTube for WDW Radio Live. And make sure you don't miss a thing by subscribing to my free weekly email newsletter. And when you do, you'll get a free copy of my 102 Things to Do at Walt Disney World at Least Once book over at wdwradio.com/newsletter. And if you dig the history, secrets, and fun facts, take a walk with me literally and virtually through the parks with my Walt Disney World audio guide tours, now available as free immersive 3D tours wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Lou Mongello or WDW Audio Tours. If you are a creator or entrepreneur, please join me this October in Walt Disney World for my Momentum Weekend Workshop, a hands-on, in-person, 50-person, one-room event to help you build real momentum in your business and brand through presentations, workshops, networking, and a 200-page workbook filled with practical and tactical exercises. Details and tickets are over at loumongello.com/momentum, but do not wait. We are already more than 65% sold out. And if you want to bring a little bit of Disney magic to your next event, brand, business, team, or event, I speak on storytelling, customer experience, and creating memorable moments inspired by the Disney parks and leadership lessons from Walt. Learn more and reach out at loumongello.com. And when you're ready to plan your next Disney vacation, visit my friends over at mousefantravel.com for completely free expert planning and guidance. More importantly, they treat you like family, and it's who I've trusted for more than 17 years. Connect and chat with me on social. I am at Lou Mongello on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn. And if you enjoy the show, and I hope that you do, please rate, review, and share it with a friend. It helps more than you know. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's episode of the WDW Radio Show. Since 1981, Indiana Jones has captured our imaginations with thrilling chases and ancient artifacts and that unmistakable silhouette, the whip, the fedora, and the spirit of adventure. But in the Disney parks, Indy's story became more than just a movie. It became something like what Walt wanted back in Disneyland in 1955. It became something that we could step into. From the giant rolling boulder to explosive stunt shows to temple curses and cursed coasters, we've been able to enjoy decades of I Named the Dog Indiana Jones at Disney. And today we're going to explore the complete story of Indy, or you call him Dr. Jones doll, at the Disney parks. And joining me is someone who helped bring these experiences to life, not just in his home, where I have to imagine he was dressing up as Indiana Jones. He could probably tell those stories himself, but he is former Imagineer, author, a creative force. He is the Indy to my short round. The jokes just write themselves. He is Jason Surrell. Jason, welcome back.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, especially for a subject that is so near and dear to my heart. And I do have a bullwhip, but that story is probably more appropriate for WDW Radio After Dark.
Right.
So we'll just leave that.
That's if you are a Patreon member, we'll share that story there.
And you know what? It's worth the upgrade.
So, yeah, we had the last time we talked, I think Indy came up, and at some point, right around the 30th anniversary of the Disneyland attraction, we're like, hey, let's just sort of really take a deep dive into Indy in the parks. But I want to talk, I love sort of origin stories. Talk to me about your relationship with Indy. What is your sort of both personal and professional connection to Indiana Jones?
Well, as you might imagine, my personal connection with Indiana Jones goes back much further than my professional one. And I like to say that Indiana Jones, specifically the original trilogy, has had just as much of an influence on me personally and professionally as Star Wars. You hear so many stories from show business luminaries about how influential Star Wars was, and I certainly count myself as one of those people. But the original Indiana Jones trilogy was just as impactful, and there are times where I privately wonder if it was even more impactful on me, probably due to my love of Harrison Ford and the adventure milieu in which those movies take place. But it ultimately comes down to when those original films came out, 1981. And I do have to salute you for getting 1981 right, because I took my son to see the special Father's Day screening of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. And in the special introduction, Leonard Maltin said 1982. And I'm like, Leonard Elias Maltin! How could you, of all people, pooch that date? But anyway, 81, 84, 89, I already dated myself. So I was 11, 14, and 19. So as with Star Wars, those first three films came during a very formative period in my life and made an incredible impression and just increased my infatuation, my boyhood infatuation and hero worship of Harrison Ford, because he's really more than an actor, and especially for people of my generation. I'm smack in the middle of Generation X. He's John Wayne. He's a larger than life figure. He transcends the notion of acting and even movie stardom. I mean, he's truly one of the few iconic people in the history of motion pictures, and to this day, you can see the shelf behind me here. It's filled with Indy memorabilia, and it's just had an enormous influence. I can't overstate what those films mean to me.
Well, a couple of quick things. One, I'm really happy, and our relationship is not only solidified, Jason, but I think it's escalated a little bit. The fact that you called it the original trilogy, because the last two movies...
I'm going to give you 2 weeks to de-escalate the relationship.
The last two movies don't, it's like The Godfather. Like the first two count, the third doesn't. The last two movies don't. My son and I literally just watched, I was going to say all three movies and then those other two, which just don't necessarily bear full mention.
Well, I will say this, and they can come after me in the comments. I love all of them. Not equally.
Not equally, right.
Well, I mean, how could you? Raiders of the Lost Ark, along with Empire Strikes Back, Jaws, The Godfather. Raiders of the Lost Ark is simply a perfect movie. Just as he did with Jaws, Spielberg made a blockbuster summer movie that is a perfect cinematic experience. You just can't improve upon it. But I have always been a staunch defender of Temple of Doom. I love the fact that George and Stephen were very consciously trying to do something different and a complete departure from Raiders of the Lost Ark, hence the darker themes and a kind of a little bit more grown-up approach, perhaps too grown-up, because we got the PG-13 rating as a result of that. And then Last Crusade, of course, is a wonderful movie anchored by that central relationship between Harrison Ford and Sean Connery. But those last two movies, I'm a little bit like Kevin Smith in that I'm a very easy mark, and it doesn't take a lot to get me invested. So, you could say they're making another Indiana Jones movie, and I'm like, is it Harrison? Is there a hat? Is there a whip? I'm in. I don't care. And that extends for me to Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny. And Dial of Destiny, through fortunate happenstance, I was able to take my son to the world premiere in Hollywood. And just to stand with my 10-year-old, 9 at the time, actually, as George Lucas is walking by and Steven Spielberg, and, he had his leather jacket and his oversized hat on. And every time I'll never forget, he looked up at me at one point with wonder on his face, and he goes, "Daddy, that's Harrison Ford." I go, I know. Just, this is a formative experience.
Don't you see Daddy crying? Of course it's Harrison Ford.
Exactly. This is a core memory. And then when that curtain went up and John Williams is conducting the orchestra, I'm trying to convey to my son, and I'm sure he got it on some level, and I know he'll get it when he's an adult. But, I'm trying to convey to him what a big deal this is. And like I said, every time somebody would walk by, "Daddy, it's Steven Spielberg." I'm like, yeah, I know. We're both having the same reaction, I assure you.
That's how you know you're raising your child right. And listen, my son's the same way. We got to see John Williams. We got to see him conduct as a surprise at Star Wars Celebration years ago. And we looked at each other with tears in our eyes like, we'll never get this opportunity again. And it was something special to see that. But, to your point about Harrison Ford, especially for us Gen Xers, he was everybody that we as little boys wanted to be, right? He was Indiana Jones. He was Han Solo. He was the president. He was Detective Decker. He was Jack Ryan. He was all of these incredible characters with such a wide scope and breadth of performances that you're right. We were going to the movies to see Harrison as much as we were going to see the film itself.
Absolutely. And that's a testament to the brilliant casting. And it still blows my mind that it could have been Tom Selleck, and George was reluctant to use him again after American Graffiti and Star Wars. And just to think that we might not have had that is just mind-boggling to me.
Yeah. And, his story of from Carpenter to all of these roles is fascinating as well. But, it is all these years later, and Indiana Jones still resonates, right? Why do you think Indy, the films and the character, have endured? I think both on films and in the parks. Look, Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular still packs him in. Why do you think that is? Why do you think he's endured so much?
I think because Indiana Jones has endured because, like Star Wars and like a number of properties that certainly make their way into theme parks, it's timeless. And that might seem a little strange when you consider that they're period films. And especially when you add the last two, we get that 1930s, pre-World War II era. But then you get the late 1950s and then the late 1960s. But Indy is a timeless property. The films are on constantly. Last weekend, they're on the Paramount Network. They're on all of these channels. Because I remember I caught myself watching The Last Crusade not that long ago, like within the past week or two. And I'm like, wait a minute, you're going to see it on the big screen. Don't screw this up. But they're just films that, like Jaws, like Star Wars, like The Godfather, like any number of our favorite classic films, if they're on, I'm going to sit down and watch. I couldn't even tell you how many times I've seen the first three in particular. And I think it's due to this timeless quality that they have. And I think that is in part due to George and Stephen consciously tapping into these sort of universal truths, much like Star Wars is based on the monomyth. And that's one of the reasons that has hung in there for so long. It's because you're dealing with things that have been around almost since the dawn of humanity. And in a similar way, I think Indiana Jones taps into those qualities. And then there's the fact that they're just amazing films and great fun to watch. So, of course, they've been around for over 40 years, going back to Raiders.
Yeah, and it is this generational thing too, Jason. When you were talking about going with your son, I remember first seeing these movies with my dad, who has since passed. And when he passed, my brother and I were going through his stuff, and he had some amazing pieces of memorabilia. My brother, quick story, my brother has a life-size Han Solo in carbonite in his house, in his bathroom, whatever, that's his choice. But he has the life-size Han Solo, but he also has this like framed dagger from one of the films that my dad bought that he wanted. But like my brother and I still love Indy. I have an Indy statue in my bedroom, so I guess it's weird. But I've got, the Holy Grail, and I've got the top of the Staff of Ra. And last year I gave him the Grail Diary, which he just thought was like the best gift ever. And I'm like, we were both winning Brother of the Year. And, the fact that we continue to get to experience Indy in the parks is remarkable. And so I want to sort of go back a little bit in time to how he made his way into the parks. Right? It goes back to the 80s, not long after Raiders really very quickly cemented him as one of cinema's greatest action heroes. And with the studios preparing to open just a few years later in 1989, it really was the perfect opportunity for Imagineers to bring those thrills of Hollywood and the stunts and Indy to life in a way that we hadn't seen before. And then since then, obviously, it's expanded around the world. And as we're going to talk about, all the experiences are wonderfully different, but they still capture that same spirit of danger and discovery and adventure. So I thought we would go sort of park by park and year by year to explore the Indy attractions in the parks around the world and their history and how they were brought to life and some of the stories, stunts, and maybe behind the scenes. So let's start where it all began, which is in Disney's Hollywood Studios in The Great Movie Ride, where it was his first official appearance. And I love the fact to a certain degree that Indy's first presence in the parks didn't come with a sort of a bang. It wasn't this sort of big dedicated show, but it almost was this, Jason, I look at it as almost like a reverent tribute, right? To in the park's original centerpiece, which obviously opened with the studios in 89, because they nestle this relatively new film among scenes from Casablanca and The Wizard of Oz, and they take this iconic moments, with Indy and Sal lifting the Ark of the Covenant, which was a sort of very quiet, but I think very powerful tribute to one of cinema's greatest adventures.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because you touched on some key dates that I think are worth noting. You had mentioned Raiders coming out in 81 and then the Disney MGM Studios opening in 89. But think about this. In May of 84, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom came out. Then in October of 84, Michael Eisner and Frank Wells took over Disney. And they very famously made that visit to Imagineering and started talking to the Imagineers about things they had on the drawing board. And very shortly after that, they began developing Captain EO and Star Tours. But what's significant about that is Star Tours is a film or a film series that Walt Disney could have and would have made. And if Walt had been alive, still been alive when George Lucas was shopping around Star Wars, I think it would have been a Disney picture from day one. Then the other significant year is 1989, in which in May 1st, 1989, Disney MGM Studios opened. And then mere 3 weeks later or so, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade came out. And then shortly after that, the Epic Stunt Spectacular opened. Because if I remember correctly, that was a little bit delayed because they were trying to put the finishing touches on it. And I was on the Walt Disney World College program in the summer of 1989 and spent an inordinate amount of free time at Disney MGM Studios because it was the bright, shiny new toy. And I was there so much when I was off the clock, it was almost, you need to see an analyst and explore this. But I love the scene that you're referencing in The Great Movie Ride, because obviously with the state of audio animatronics and what technology can do, you're probably not going to get the rolling boulder yet. But the moment they did pick is the pivotal moment in the film where they raise the Ark out of its container. And it's a quiet moment, but it's one of the most important moments in the film in one of the most iconic locations from the film, the Well of Souls. And obviously one of the things that Disney does best is take you to iconic places that you've always wanted to go and could never go in your real life. But Disney MGM Studios and The Great Movie Ride allowed you to do that. And the other thing that I think is significant that you touched on, mentioning The Wizard of Oz and Casablanca, a mere 8 years after Raiders of the Lost Ark was released in theaters, it's being immortalized in the centerpiece of the newest Disney theme park alongside Casablanca, Mary Poppins, Wizard of Oz, all of the classics you mentioned. That's power. That is cinematic power. And it's a very early testament to just how beloved those films were.
Yeah, and I almost felt, and I think the way it was obviously designed this way too, that they wanted this scene to be simple and powerful and impactful. Although I love the fact, I'd go with my brother and he's like, this is wrong. I'm like, what do you mean it's wrong? Like, well, Sala and Indy are backwards. This is not. And I'm like, I love the fact that you're a nerd, and I love the fact that you picked that out. Even things like, the whip was on the wrong hip, just to sort of make it more visible for guests that come by. But instead of putting a scene in there that was not in the film, they sort of extend that adventure type story with the interaction that you have with the cast member that goes to steal the jewel, really sort of extending that scene, but not interfering with or interrupting the one actually from the film.
Well, in that moment, to your point, I think Raiders of the Lost Ark is representative of the adventure genre. And then when you leave that scene, you're leaving the world of Indiana Jones, but you're still squarely within the cinematic adventure genre. So I think that's what allows that to work, because that particular scene where the tour guide takes the jewel is not from any one particular film. So it's interesting that there are a couple of moments in The Great Movie Ride that are more genre-based as opposed to specific film-based. And I think that's what you're seeing in that little moment in The Great Movie Ride. And yet it does continue the scene seamlessly, because you're still in that kind of an environment. You're just not in the Well of Souls anymore, but it feels right. And I think that also speaks to the point you made. And I do salute your brother about the position of the actors and the whip and all that. I think he may need to join me in some group counseling. But it's like, it feels right. And that's really, in my experience, that's always been one of the core tenets of themed entertainment, themed design, and especially with the work that Disney does and the work that I've done at Disney. You want it to feel right. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm one of those obsessives who's trying to make it as correct as possible, but in this case there's a big difference between correct and right, and you always want it to feel right even if it's not correct.
Yeah, there's the balance between authenticity and clarity when you're creating scenes.
Authenticity, clarity, and mental illness. It's a slippery slope.
But Disney was clearly all in on this, because like you said, they put this scene in the centerpiece of Great Movie Ride a few years after the first movie debuts. They're like, listen, we're not going to have one bit of Indy in the parks. We're going to have two, because just a few months later, he takes literal center stage at the Epic Stunt Spectacular, really bringing the action part of the action-packed adventures to life. And this isn't just a show sort of taking scenes from the movie. What I love is, because it's what the studios very much was at the beginning, was this behind the scenes look at how the action sequences of Raiders were filmed, with these massive sets and real explosions. Like, these are not screens and live stunt performers. And I think this was really the first time, Jason, especially in an environment like this, that Disney guests could watch movie making magic happen live. And it continues to thrill ever since. Like we were saying before we started recording, Indy still packs them in. Like, they still fill that theater Let's talk a little bit about the show and sort of how this, and again, it's a long show too. It's like a 30-minute live action show, recreating those scenes came to life.
Yeah, it's really Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular is something of an outlier now for all those reasons you mentioned. It's a long experience, and even in many ways, stunt shows aren't as common in theme parks as they used to be. And in the case of Epic, you're really getting the Reese's peanut butter cup of stunt shows, because you're getting those immersive in-world moments where he's going after the Golden Idol, where they're in the Cairo marketplace, and then, of course, when there's the assault on the Flying Wing at the end. But then in between, you get this insight into how all of these stunts were created, and you actually get to see the scenery move. And that is a show in and of itself. When that temple starts to break apart and move, and the Cairo marketplace starts to come together, and when that flying wing starts to make its journey, downstage, it's breathtaking. And the fact that you're getting both of those stories simultaneously, makes it educational while it's entertaining. And the fact that it is still relevant, it still packs them in, to your point, and it is not a small house, as we know. It is an arena, and it's always packing them in. The only thing that has changed is the level of an audience's sophistication in terms of how these films are made. And this I can say from experience with the work I've done with both Disney and Universal, we have drifted away out of necessity from here's how we do it, behind the scenes making of experiences, to more immersive, you're in it experiences. And Indiana Jones is probably the greatest case study for that, because in 1989, you've got Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular, which is very much making of here's how we do it. And then 6 years later, in 1995, you've got Indiana Jones Adventure, Temple of the Forbidden Eye, where it is incredibly immersive, and you are most certainly in it and part of the story. So it's interesting to watch that evolution begin to unfold.
Well, I think there's a couple of things to extrapolate from that too. So you talk about the sets, right? And I think at the time, and they still might be, it was one of, or the still largest moving stage sets in any of the Disney parks. But I think it's this impact of live action storytelling versus ride based attractions, and to a certain degree, for those lucky few, it was a truly immersive, it still is a truly immersive experience, because you get to be pulled up on stage. I'm not saying that I'm bitter that I've never, ever been pulled up on stage, despite all of my best efforts and wild waving of my hands. But you want to talk about creating impactful, magical moments for those guests, those families and friends that either get to step on that stage and live it out as being part of sort of an Indiana Jones, film that's being done right in front of you. Those are the kind of things that I think sort of continue to make this something special and very different. There's not a lot like this anywhere.
Yeah, and it is an unbelievable experience. I too was never a volunteer, but I have been on the stage from being involved in some behind the scenes stuff and directing over there. And it is kind of overwhelming when you're on the other side of that barrier, and looking out into this vast sea of spaces that are watching you. And then, the sequence that you get to be part of, the stunts are literally unfolding around you. And now I'm at an age where I pull a hamstring if I even watch the acrobats come out. But for the lucky guests, that get to be a part of it, you're really in it. You're surrounded by it. And, if you do a 360 when you're standing on that stage, you're on a film set. You're in a Cairo marketplace with all of this Indiana Jones action unfolding around you. And that was, and to some extent still is, unprecedented.
And what I've always loved too, and it's still, I think it's still jaw dropping, is those live stunts that are, the effects are real. They're being triggered in real time by both the cast and the stunt crew. So there is a little bit of that wow factor and danger. And I also, I think about this too, Jason, as you wonder how many kids in the audience sit there and watch and go, I want to do that. Whether they're watching the actors, whether they're watching the stage managers, whether they're watching, my daughter does stage management. It's what she's studying. When she goes to these things, she doesn't watch necessarily what's going on stage. She's watching what's happening in the booth, right? She's watching that tech booth and how the director is coordinating everything. You wonder how many people watch this and say, this is the path I want to go down, and this is the thing that I eventually want to do, because it very much fell into the fact that when you went to Disney MGM Studios, you were going to a quote-unquote real working studio to see how the magic was made.
Yeah, what's interesting about the point you're making there is that, everyone has talked about, and even at the top of this conversation, we talked about how Star Wars and Indiana Jones influenced people to go into film. And then on the flip side, we talk about how The Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean influenced people to want to become Imagineers one day. But with Indiana Jones Epic Stunt Spectacular, again, it's the Reese's Cup. And again, I hope to get a free case of Reese's Cups for all of these plugs. But there, you're looking at an experience that could inspire you to go into film, either in front of the camera or behind the camera, or you might be inspired, like your daughter, to go into live theatrical performance. So it's interesting to me how that one show, has one foot squarely in each of those camps, the film camp and the theme park camp. And it's been influential on both fronts, because I've met a lot of young people who have cited it as a formative theme park experience for them.
And I love, too, the fact that this show hasn't really changed very much in the, since it opened, I don't want to do the math, 30 some odd years ago in the studios, but it has changed a little bit. It did go through in 2000, right? It went through a little bit of a refurbishment and upgrade. And when it did, it reopened with a little bit of a very special event for the Dr. Joneses and the non-Dr. Joneses.
Yeah, it was interesting. I actually got to work on that, the rehab in 2000, and I got to do, let's call it a script polish. We didn't change anything, certainly, but I was able to add in some references and some jokes that I think the fans would appreciate. There's that famous line where the double said, if we do our jobs right, you won't be able to tell me and Harrison Ford apart. And I had the assistant director say, you want to know the biggest difference between you and Harrison Ford? And he goes, what's that? About $20 million. And it worked. And now I've noticed that the number keeps increasing. The last time I went to see it, I think it was up to 300 million. So that was fun. And then I remember I inserted a line about how, filmmaking is memories, friends, and 8x10s. And that was a song that played during one of the making of specials of Raiders of the Lost Ark. So you want to talk about nerdy, and seeking counseling. I was the poster child for that.
And they had an event, right, where they brought in like 500 people with the last name of Jones, and they gave them T-shirts, and they decked them out for the grand reopening of Indy.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's you got to cap it at 500, because it's not like it's an uncommon name. but again, it's that's just another example about how you can sort of immerse yourself in these things at Disney parks.
And like you, while I have never been chosen to be a stunt performer on stage, although now that I'm thinking about it, I'm like, I really need to just start going all the time, just so I can.
You got to check that box, Lou.
But I have been able to go on stage for special events. It has been used and continues to be used for corporate events and special events. And there was one, I didn't remember what the event was, but when I heard what it was, I'm like, I'm buying a ticket, because I need to step on that stage. I want to see it from that side.
Well, it's a little bit like the Haunted Mansion ballroom. It's just like, I would kill to be
do
there.
Anything just to sort of see it from that side.
I had a surreal experience about a month ago, because completely coincidentally, the original Indiana Jones from Epic Stunt Spectacular, Kevin Broussard, lives about a minute from my house. It's just outside our development. And one morning we were taking the kids to Dunkin' Donuts. So I want to get a plug-in for Dunkin' Donuts, and I expect all these treats to start showing up. And Kevin was walking across the street. He was walking his dog, and he was crossing the street, and they were moving a little slowly because the dog is older. So I roll down the window and I go, I expected you to move faster, Dr. Jones. He looks up and he just started laughing. And he goes, I'm slowing down too, but it's because of her. Dog's moving as fast as she can. But even that's surreal because I see him walking the dog a lot when I go get the mail or this or that. And you're just like, oh, there's Indiana Jones. That's kind of cool. And he still looks great. He looks better, and he's a little bit older than me. But I mean, he could still clean your clock for you.
I just saw him somewhere. I was at some Disney event, or I don't remember where it was that he was brought out on stage. Maybe, I don't know if it was with the original Marion or not, but I do remember seeing him. I was like, yeah, this guy still looks really good for.
Well, Kevin and the original Marion, and I'm so sorry her name escapes me at the moment, but they were invited to the premiere of Dial of Destiny, because that's another funny story. I'm standing on the red carpet with my son, and I saw them, and it's almost like when you're a kid and you see your teacher in the supermarket. It just doesn't compute. So I'm sitting there, so I didn't realize it was him right away, because why would I think that? And then I'm like, that's a really good-looking guy. I bet he's famous. I started taking pictures like a moron. And then I realized, you dummy, it's Kevin Broussard, in the original Marion. And hopefully people can comment on Marion, because her name escapes me. But I thought that was a wonderful gesture on Disney and Lucasfilm's part to invite them out to the premiere of Dial of Destiny. There's a wonderful photo of the two of them getting to meet Harrison Ford. And I've always loved that the company did that for them.
Yeah, I think that's great. But they also, back in 2010, during Star Wars Celebration, they also rethemed Indy for one night only. It has never been done again, and I am sad that I missed it. It is the Raiders of the Lost Jedi Temple of Doom, a fan film of epic proportions.
To this day, that is one of my favorite projects that I have ever worked on. I was one of the show writers and directors for Star Wars Weekends during that time. And
may it rest in peace.
Exactly. I visit the grave every once in a while. But so we knew that we were going to have this special event called Last Tour to Endor in, I think it was August of 2010, to commemorate the closing of Star Tours. So it was one last opportunity for the fans to take the last tour to Endor. And then we had a shutdown ceremony, which featured Anthony Daniels doing the voice of C-3PO. So that was a dream come true to get to direct him. But the big one was the opportunity to take the Epic Stunt Spectacular and, for the first time ever, bring the worlds of Indiana Jones and Star Wars together. Not unlike, wait for it, a Reese's Peanut Butter Cup. And I was drawing very consciously on my previous experience with Bill and Ted's Excellent Halloween Adventure to do something that would be really fun for the fans and not take it very seriously. The thing that most people don't know about is the show that we did was not the original script that we did. What I originally wrote was a show called George and Steve's Epic Adventure. And it was basically, because this was 2010, well before Dial of Destiny. So it was essentially the making of Indiana Jones 5. And there was a line about how George said, oh, well, people love Star Wars and they love Indiana Jones, so they'll love them even more together. And the whole show was about the making of Indiana Jones 5 and bringing the two worlds together. And the two lead actors played George and Stephen, and Harrison Ford was Harrison Ford. And it was just filled with in-jokes. And I think it was one of the funniest things I've ever written. And I'll never forget Lynn Hale, who was the head publicist at Lucasfilm and George's personal publicist. She loved it. She thought it was hysterical. She thought George would think it's hysterical. Then I think there was a vice president in marketing at Lucasfilm who saw it, and she was not as thrilled. So I got the news on a Monday that we weren't going to be able to do that show, so you better think of something else. And I went into full panic mode. And then one morning it just occurred to me. It's like, okay, we'll keep the idea that they're making a movie, but instead of Indiana Jones 5, let's take the George and Stephen characters and make them fan filmmakers who won a contest, a fan film contest, and they have won the opportunity to make a fan film of epic proportions. And one of the fans was a major Star Wars nerd, and the other was a major Indiana Jones nerd. And it was the notion of bringing the two together. And as crazy as it sounds, that was important to me, because even though the show is ridiculous and silly and would never happen, it is based in reality. We're not just having these characters show up together willy-nilly. They're there for a reason. So in the original draft, it would have been a little bit more out there reason that, George has decided to introduce Star Wars into Indiana Jones. But in many ways, the story of making a fan film of epic proportions that brings the two together, it explains it. It's ridiculous, but it is an explanation. And then it allowed us to have all the fun that we wound up having. I will never forget in the first rehearsal, the first full dress rehearsal, where Han and Indy meet each other for the first time and shake hands. It's like, it's ridiculous, but you get goosebumps. And then, of course, we got to add in all of the Star Wars celebrities who, unlike Lou Mongello, were chosen to be extras in the show. Only this time it happened to include Mark Hamill, Ashley Eckstein, Jeremy Bulloch, all of these wonderful Star Wars performers. And getting to it, and the Mark Hamill was a last minute addition. I was actually out in the park with my wife watching Symphony in the Stars, which was the very first Star Wars fireworks spectacular that I got to direct. And my cell phone blows up and they're like, you got to come to the green room. Mark wants to do the show. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So literally on the fly, we inserted Mark into, I think it was the last show of the night, and he came riding in on the X-Wing parade float that we borrowed for the show and blew up the flying wing. So it was absolutely a dream come true. It was wonderful. I got to work with Seth Green. So we had a moment in one of the shows where the characters were sort of ribbing Robot Chicken a little bit, and the crowd's going, oh, because they're such huge fans. And then Seth Green wanders on the stage going, hey, I'm right here. And the crowd went bananas. And that was actually the show that George saw. And that one is available online. I think it was Attractions Magazine that did a wonderful job of documenting that. And it's the show in its entirety. It's got the Seth Green moment. I'm sorry, my dog, who is not named Indiana, is upset about something. Wednesday, stop it. So it was wonderful to use him, and then it was wonderful to watch George watching the show. And then afterwards, Lynn Hale came running up to me. She goes, "Come over here, honey," and she takes me over to George. And I had already pitched Star Tours to him a couple years earlier, but she goes, "George, this is Jason. He worked on the new Star Tours, and he wrote and directed the show." And he goes, "Oh, congratulations! You did a great job combining the two worlds." And maybe the enthusiasm wasn't there, but I think he liked it. George was George. Let's put it that way.
It sounds like a Walt. Like that'll work.
That'll work. Okay, thank you. Well, just do something people will enjoy. Okay, yeah. I'll get right on that.
But it came at such an interesting time, right? This tribute to the shared Lucasfilm DNA between Indy and Star Wars, and obviously Harrison Ford, and this was, I think, like an early example of Disney embracing the fan culture and the crossovers. This again before acquiring Lucasfilm. I think it also set this sort of very interesting, creative what if prototype for future mashup experiences, because at that time it was a very wacky time, especially at Disney's Hollywood Studios, because they were mashing up everything. It was Star Wars and the Muppets and Star Wars and this, and like Darth Vader was dancing, Leia was twerking. It was like the hyperspace hoopla.
I have apologized for that on numerous occasions. I was part of the problem, as we like to say.
I think before they're like, wait a minute, character integrity. We need to start thinking things up. But I still have my Star Wars Muppet mashup figures buried somewhere in the closet.
Absolutely. It was interesting because that's actually why Seth Green's Detour show went away, because when Disney acquired Lucasfilm, one of the earlier decisions Kathy Kennedy made was, hey, look, these Star Wars is coming back to the big screen, and we need people to take these characters seriously. we need kids to be afraid of Darth Vader, so he shouldn't be out there dancing to Thriller, which was me, by the way. So either you're welcome or I apologize, depending on which side of the fence.
No, I think the thanks goes to you, because it was fun, and it's part of the reason why I miss Star Wars weekend so much, because it almost felt less like an event than just like a fan get together, because there were celebrities just sitting in tents around Echo Lake, and there were these fun mashups and costumes and Darth Maul and all the merchandise and all the food. You just wanted to sort of hang out over the weekend, even if you weren't necessarily doing things, and you were revisiting the fan favorites because the experience was different because of who was in the audience with you.
Yeah, it was very much a party, and it had a party atmosphere. And I would go so far as to say it was Star Wars Celebration before Star Wars Celebration.
Yeah.
And, for this wonderful period of time, it was something you got to look forward to in May and June of every year. And just the idea that you could have those one-on-one encounters with Star Wars personalities, either in front of the camera or behind the camera. I was actually the one who suggested that in addition to the on-camera talent, we salute some of the behind-the-scenes folks as well, because they are just as Ben Burt, Dennis Muren. I mean, the list, John Williams, God knows, the list goes on. The folks behind the camera involved in the making of these films are every bit as beloved as the actors, portraying these beloved characters in front of the camera. And that was how I got to know Ashley Eckstein, who's wonderful. She's my son's godmother. Star Wars has just given me so many wonderful gifts. Warwick Davis is my daughter's godfather.
Wow.
Now I get the question, well, what if you have a third kid? I'm like, I guess I have to call Harrison Ford's agent or something and work something out. But the reason I bring that up, it's not name dropping. It's to demonstrate the relationships that emerge, the friendships that emerge from Star Wars weekends. I mean, my wife and children and I now consider Ashley and Warwick, their family. And that is all because of Star Wars. And that is a testament to, as you said, the atmosphere that Star Wars weekends created. It was a party where people came together to share their love for this galaxy.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And I think this is the year that Ashley finally wins the much-deserved Nicest Person on the Planet award.
Oh, she's on. And, here's the thing. It's 100% real. Yeah. That is exactly who she is. So who you see on TV, who you see when you're standing in line waiting for her is Ashley Eckstein. And she will take as much time as any fan wants when they come up to see her, to the point where the organizers are like, speed it along. But
they start flickering the lights like, Ashley, the con is over and there's still 100 people in line.
And she's like, I don't care. I will see.
And she makes you feel like you are the only person in that line. I watched the dynamic between her. Yeah, this top 10 things we love about Ashley Eckstein.
She's such a decent person. It throws off the curve for the rest of us.
It makes you feel bad about yourself. Why can't
you're really making this difficult for regular people.
But just quickly, just to tie up Indy in the studios and the stunt show, I think this show was so innovative at the time, and it really, I think, did a lot to help support the idea of Disney MGM Studios as being this quote unquote working studio park concept. And I think what is fascinating is that it continues to be explosive and exciting and repeatable every day, multiple times a day for 35 plus years. And I'm sure that there were conversations, hey, do we update it? Do we include scenes from Temple or Last Crusade? Just quickly, give me your thoughts about the longevity of this attraction in a park that is very much continuing to change, and its identity has changed, I think, multiple times over the years.
Yeah, that's been an interesting creative problem to have when both of these companies, and I mean Disney and Universal, sort of independently decided to get out of the production business. For Disney MGM Studios, that did create a problem in that half of the park's identity was built on making of behind the scenes, this is how we do it. And then the other half was the Hollywood that never was and always will be. And so it's been interesting. And I got to take part in some of that evolution over the years because it's been a years long evolution that is still continuing. And what's interesting about Indiana Jones, I think to your point, is that is the last remnant of this is how we do it, making of. And it's still there because it's timeless and it's popular and it still works. And I think one of the reasons that it hasn't been updated is it hasn't needed to. People still love that original show because it's based on Raiders of the Lost Ark, which you are not going to improve on. Whether it's on the screen or in the park, it ain't getting any better than Raiders. So yeah, the fact that it's still in there, and who knows how long that's going to last. Disney's Hollywood Studios now is sort of continuing its evolution into a more immersive park with things like Toy Story Land and Star Wars Galaxy's Edge, and now you've got Monsters Incorporated coming in. And I think that is indicative of where it's going to go and probably where it should go, because people are a lot more savvy about how films are made. And I don't mean this in a negative way, but it's almost like they don't care. Mm-hmm. They'll watch entertainment shows on TV. They'll watch documentaries. They'll watch all the special features, on Blu-rays. So they don't need to go to the theme park for that. They would rather be in those worlds. So I don't want to see how you made Star Wars. I want to be in Star Wars. And I do think that will continue. And what's wonderful is Indy's about to get that treatment at Animal Kingdom. Mm-hmm. And I could not be more excited about that, because Indiana Jones Adventure is one of my favorite attractions of all time. And the idea that we're finally going to get it here 20 minutes from my house is incredibly exciting.
Well, and we'll talk about that, because I think we're not going to get that. I think we're going to hopefully get a little bit of different version. But
yes. Yeah.
You talk about the evolution, not just of technology and storytelling, but I think the evolution of guest expectations as well. So Disney's got this incredible working, probably very profitable model of Indy in the parks. And they're like, you know what? Let's leave this behind. Let's go across the pond to Disneyland Paris, and we're going to trade storytelling for speed. Because when they open up Indiana Jones and the Temple of Peril, because I'm not going to try and say the French version, in 1993, it offers something completely different, something Disney never did before, which was a looping roller coaster, themed to this crumbling temple ruin that, from what I understand, Jason, one, was not necessarily meant to be a permanent attraction, but really was something that was something temporary to kind of boost attendance for a park that may or may not have been doing as well as expected.
Yeah, Disneyland Paris had an interesting origin, as has been well documented, and that was an attempt to increase the thrill element and get more people into the gate. But what's interesting is whenever I ride that attraction, even though it's an outdoor experience, in my mind, I am in the Temple of Doom, and you are experiencing the minecart chase. So even though it isn't as immersive as Indiana Jones Adventure or some of the attractions that you see today, it is still a box-checking Indiana Jones experience, because if you're in the right frame of mind, from a fan point of view, you're in that minecart finally. So it does check an aspirational box. And the temple bears some similarity to the Temple of the Forbidden Eyes, so you do get a cool environment, that you're racing around in. So even though it's not the Temple of Doom per se, in your mind as a fan, that's exactly what's happening to you. Not unlike when I was a kid in the 70s going on Space Mountain. Yeah, I was physically and intellectually on Space Mountain, but imaginatively in my own mind, I was in the Millennium Falcon. So the Temple of Peril definitely allows fans to check one of the boxes in terms of aspirational Indiana Jones experiences.
And I think this was different and really sort of unique for that park, right? It was built outdoors, so you had this visible track, visible structure. It's a lot smaller than any of the other Indy rides, but it's still arguably the most intense, very visually dramatic. But there is, it's unique because in the Indy lineup of even the attractions we have today, there is no dark ride. There is no story-driven vehicle. And even with, the Adventureland there, and even the park maybe even as a whole, could be argued, there's relatively limited, or especially at that time, very limited IP usage, but it did integrate into Adventureland very well. And I was thinking about, was the intent for bringing in the Indiana Jones IP just to sort of drive attendance that maybe the park wasn't pulling in? And how do they sort of balance and integrate this storytelling into what really is a thrill-first experience? Because I think it has to change when you're working with something like a roller coaster.
Well, I think you hit on something very foundational there, and it goes back to the point we made earlier about how the Indiana Jones films were movies that Walt Disney could have and would have made. If you think back to the origins of Disneyland, which we don't really think of as an IP-based experience. I'm talking originally, in the 50s, because that phrase didn't even exist back then. But it was very much IP-based in terms of cinema. So Adventureland was really meant to represent adventure film and Walt Disney's true life adventures. And the Jungle Cruise boats very famously being inspired by the African Queen. So Indiana Jones, in my view, is simply the more modern version of that. It fits seamlessly into Adventureland, whether it's Disneyland or Disneyland Paris or Tokyo Disney Sea, wherever it is, because it is naturally a part of that genre. So of course it feels like it should be there. And then you add on to the fact that not only is it genre appropriate, but it's based on one of the most beloved and popular film franchises of all time. So that's a double whammy. That's a win-win for everybody.
And while they're doing this, they are secretly or not so secretly working behind the scenes on something completely different. Because just 2 years later, Disneyland takes Indy to a whole new level. Because in 1995, Indiana Jones, The Adventure, Temple of the Forbidden Eye opens and really redefines. And I know that sort of, might be sort of a broad stroke of the brush, but it redefines what a dark ride can be. We board these rugged transports and we go into this temple and we're set on this journey, I think really for the first time with Indy himself, using this groundbreaking ride technology, jaw-dropping effects that still hit today. And I think, again, to say that it was one of the most ambitious attractions Disney ever built, I don't think is overstating it. So talk about how this attraction really sort of raised the bar.
Well, I think you hit it right on the head. Indiana Jones Adventure was positively revolutionary, and I think redefined the notion of what a dark ride could be. Because a dark ride is such a broad term. It could be Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, it could be the Haunted Mansion, or it could be Indiana Jones Adventure. What Indiana Jones did was, kick up the thrill to a previously unseen extent, especially with the EMV, the Enhanced Motion Vehicle. And, I have always said that never in my life, and I think this still applies today, never in my life have I felt more like I was in a film than on Indiana Jones Adventure, because you've got all of that wonderful, timeless iconography. You've got the John Williams music. And now, for the first time, you have the physical experience. Because, again, even the Temple of Peril, at the end of the day, is kind of a wild mouse kind of roller coaster. So it's something that, although it's great and recalls the mine car chase, it's still something that you've probably experienced before. But Indiana Jones Adventure, Temple of the Forbidden Eye, you had never experienced before. And I will never forget, I made my first trip, my first business trip, because I was working for Universal Studios Florida Entertainment at the time, and we were making a business trip to Hollywood to see Forbidden Hollywood, which was a kind of a satirical stage show they used to do. But again, the Disney fan in me is like, we're going to Anaheim, and we are going on that ride. And I'll never forget, because I had other Universal people with me. We get to Disneyland early in the morning, and the line for Indy is already halfway down Main Street. And the people I was with were like, oh, well, obviously there's no way we're waiting for that. I'm like, you can do whatever the hell you want. I am getting in this line, and I am going on this ride. And I was absolutely blown away. And I think it's a testament to Tony Baxter's guiding principle, which was a question. What would the audience want or even expect to see in something called Indiana Jones Adventure? And the answers just come Fast and Furious. Well, the hat, the whip, the snakes, rats, insects, the rolling boulder. There's an endless well of material to choose from, and all of that came together with this new enhanced motion vehicle to take themed entertainment to a new level. And then, within Imagineering, the joke was, I think, one of the project management executives, he was speaking about Indiana Jones Adventure and Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, which opened up at Disney MGM Studios a year earlier in 1994. And they were like, this is outrageous. We will never again build $100 million attraction. And it's like, well, you're right. Now $100 million is a bargain, and maybe you get a boat ride for that. But I always thought that was funny because in addition to the intellectual property, it sort of adapted the idea of bringing a blockbuster experience into a theme park as well.
Well, I think this is the attraction that they always wanted to build, but couldn't at the very beginning of the relationship, right? So, because the story of Indy obviously goes back to not just a galaxy far, far away, but it goes to Ron and Diane Disney Miller, right? Hosting George Lucas. They come up with this agreement to create attractions for the parks. It's why we get Captain EO and Star Tours and things like that. And when Tony Baxter and Skip Lang see Raiders of the Lost Ark and are blown away, you have to imagine that their minds are going to, how can we bring this experience into the parks? Again, Lucasfilm not necessarily formally integrated into the parks, but I think when Michael Eisner came in at just the right time with Frank Wells, he sees this IP-driven film as a key to really sort of bringing. We really have to thank his son, right? Like his son, Breck.
Breck Eisner is the hidden hero of Disneyland in the 1980s.
He brought his 14-year-old son to executive Imagineering meetings to determine what's going to appeal to teens. If you liked Splash Mountain, you can probably thank Breck. If you liked this idea of riding the movies, even if they weren't Disney-made movies, right? Because remember, Eisner came from Paramount. He personally greenlit Raiders. So this this integration of these even non-Disney characters and movies coming in made sense. And I think when the relationship first happened, they weren't here yet, right? They weren't able to execute on something like this, which is why I think some of the early concepts, right? They wanted to have young Indiana Jones, right? And there was sort of the spirit of the West based on that Last Crusade
train sequence. Yeah.
Yeah. The
I think it was going to be a stunt show. They had talked about a whole little mini Indy land and young Indiana Jones, not only from Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, but then it obviously became the television series after that. That was supposed to be a part of it as well. And to your point, yeah, Michael had skin in the game, because he was the one that greenlit Raiders of the Lost Ark and had that relationship with Lucas and Spielberg. And then, Tony Baxter has often said to me, thank God Breck Eisner had good instincts, or we really could have had a problem.
But and there was, and I think a lot of people don't know this, that the concept for what Indy was going to come to the park wasn't originally just going to be a single attraction. There was going to be the Indiana Jones Expedition, which was going to be this multi-experience concept located in the same area where the ride is today. And you would, and correct me if I have my facts wrong, you would arrive sort of in this base camp, which you could see from the Jungle Cruise and the railroad, and you could have one of three different possible experiences. You could do a vehicle tour of the crumbling ruins and the ravines. There was a mine tour through this underground dig site, or a walking tour through a labyrinth that I think you can see sort of made their way into Temple of the Forbidden Eye. I think that queue design probably was inspired by that labyrinth, and the minecar coaster may or may not have influenced the Temple of Peril in Disneyland Paris. But when you hear about what the possibility for Indiana Jones expeditions could have been, you get yourself very excited and a little bit sad at the same time.
Yeah, I will literally start crying if I see that wonderful piece of concept art, and it's on the internet. You can find it, but it's literally one of my favorite pieces of concept art that anyone has ever created, and I'm including Mark Davis and Herb Ryman. But just that image of what would become Indiana Jones Adventure. And then there's the mine cart. I think you can even see the train coming through, the jungle cruise. Just the notion of all of these things going on at the same time is mind-blowing. And I will say, in my own experience, that is a piece of art that is referenced time and time again in terms of aspirationally being something that a lot of us still want to do in themed entertainment. In many ways, it's the white whale, of themed entertainment in terms of bringing all of these wonderful connected things together in such a compelling and kinetic way. It's almost mind-blowing. And I would encourage anyone who hasn't seen it to just Google Indiana Jones concept art Disneyland, and it'll come up, and you too will start weeping.
It's a beautiful piece of art that I would love to have on my. Not if I had a fireplace, I would hang it above my fireplace. So.
Or in your bathroom, or your brother's bathroom. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the haunted carbonite in a bathroom. But
yeah, I'll have him invite you over one day, and it's quite shocking when you're trying. Whatever. But this leads to the final concept for Indiana Jones Adventure taking place. Right, they abandon the one cart concept and say, all right, let's get guests moving through here. Let's sort of build this troop transport type thing, and it leads to this incredible innovation and success factor that are able to sort of rinse and repeat in other places, which is the enhanced motion vehicle that you mentioned earlier that allows for this randomized or customized ride path and very dynamic environment that was later reused in Dinosaur in Animal Kingdom that you would never know is the exact same track layout because they're completely different experiences and feelings as you go through.
Yeah, because it's the programming that allows you to have that different experience. And that was a huge part of why it was so successful. I mean, you're driving downstairs, you're driving across a rickety wooden bridge, and it feels different. Your physical sensations are constantly changing throughout that experience. And then when you add in different sound effects cues, all of these differences that add up to dozens of different combinations that you can have to create a unique ride experience. Because I can remember, we talked about, my business trip where the line was 3 hours long, and I'm like, oh man, I'm only going to get one shot at this. And when the Jeep goes in and you see the three doors, I'm just so frustrated because I'm like, oh, I want all of them. And there's subtle differences. It's not like it's a completely different experience, but when you're sort of obsessive about the property, obsessive about the character, you want to experience everything. And that also contributes to its longevity, because even today, and we're talking 30 years this year, I still ride it and see or hear things that I've never noticed before. And again, that's a testament to Disney's attention to detail, and specifically with Indiana Jones Adventure, it was designed to be a variable, repeatable experience, which in the Lucas realm, they then took up a notch with Star Tours The Adventures Continue, where visually now it's a completely different experience almost every time you ride because of the combinations.
Or like going to the theater and seeing Clue in the theaters and not knowing which of the three different endings you were going to get. So you had to go back and watch it over and over again, or just get the DVD and you can see.
Yeah, that frustrated me too when Clue came out. My mom's like, why are you going again? I'm like, I got to see the other one.
And then you get all on the side of my face.
And that's why to this day, I yell at my son. I'm like, no more blind boxes, because you're going to get a repeat and then everyone's going to be upset. And my OCD is going to kick in and we're going to have to go back to the store. And then your mom's upset. And then the whole day is ruined.
Yeah, blind boxes have become the bane of every parent or collector's existence.
Exactly. It's like, fine, I'll go to eBay and spend $75 to get Rick Moranis, whatever.
But, again, the storytelling here is so good. It's set in 1935 and you're entering this temple to discover Mara, the deity that offers you these three different destinies, which is eternal youth, riches, or future knowledge. Voiced, and I think nobody knows this, Mara is voiced by
I don't think I know.
James Earl Jones.
You have chosen wisely. This path leads to timeless youth and beauty.
I did not know that.
Stop it. There's no way I just said something. I mean, I'm assuming that it's true, but supposedly it's James Earl Jones is the voice of Mara.
I did not know that. I will have to look into that now. Lou, you've made a fool out of me on your podcast.
Or you're about to make a fool out of me going, no, Lou, you read that on, whatever random site you read it on. But, speaking of Mara and going into these...
You know what? It was actually James Earl Jones' younger brother, Shecky. People don't know about Shecky, but he'll step in, when Jim wasn't available. No, we will look into this and reconvene on it next time I talk to you. But no, I did not know that, if it's true.
One of the things that I love about this attraction is, and we've talked about this in other attractions too, and I think this may be one of the best examples. The attraction starts before you even get into the building, right? There's a story. It's like Galaxy's Edge. I think Rise of Resistance, the story begins in the land. This story begins in this land, and as you start to walk through the jungle. But we could do an entire show just on the queue and all of the little Easter eggs, Indy Easter eggs, Star Wars Easter eggs that are located throughout. I thought it was brilliant when the attraction first opened. It was sponsored by AT&T. There were all these glyphs everywhere, and they used to give you a card. So as you went through, you could translate what said. And there was little scripts, even in that one room, in the Mara room, look not into the eyes of Mara, you shall receive the gift of blah, blah. The fact that you had this almost little zero tech interactive game escape room scavenger hunt to do in the queue while you were trying to look at some of these other little tributes in there as well, I think is brilliant.
Yeah, and it's funny because the audience loves stuff like that. I mean, first of all, anyone loves anything free. But the card reminds me a little bit of when they used to have the maps to Tom Sawyer's Island that you could ask for if you knew to ask for it. And I still have one of those Indiana Jones cards that I carry around in my wallet. I don't have occasion to use it very often, as you might imagine, but I just love having it there. It makes me feel good. But yeah, it's a very organic, interactive experience, or organic because you're deciphering and cracking clues, much the way Indiana Jones would. And you mentioned the queue. I think in '94 and '95, Disney had a 1-2 punch of the Twilight Zone, Tower of Terror, and Indiana Jones Adventure that just elevated themed, well, no pun intended. I did not mean to do that. I'll show myself out. That's a dad joke. No, but it elevated themed entertainment to the next level. And the queues were, for both of those attractions, were a big part of that. And that is something you see reverberating today, where a foundational part of a themed entertainment experience is the queue. You want to be in there, whether it's the Temple of the Forbidden Eye or Hogwarts or whatever it happens to be, you want to be there. And again, there's that abundance of Disney detail so that there's always something new that you're going to see or hear that you've never noticed before. And so I think both of those attractions, but Indiana Jones in particular, were game changers in terms of the role that the queue played in the storytelling and the immersion and the capturing of attention. Because I mentioned the 3-hour line that I got to stand in. Once you got onto the property of the temple, and especially inside, you suddenly didn't care as much because it was super cool to be there. And I think that really contributed to a lot of what we see today.
Well, because you've got the glyph translation game, you've got the rope gag and the spike room and the safety video, which you sort of forget is a safety video because you've got John Rhys Davies as Sala, and you don't realize...
Actually, that was James Earl Jones.
Everyone's going to attribute everything to James Earl Jones at this point. Exactly. But you don't realize that you're walking half a mile through this queue to get to this 50,000 square foot building outside of the berm. And look, I still believe, Jason, if there is a single room, if there's a single moment in any Disney park attraction, when those doors open and you hear, and I was going to sing like, oh, when you hear that sort of chorus and you look into that cavernous room, as impactful as when those doors open for the first time in Rise of Resistance, you see the stormtroopers, you're standing on that deck. As mind-blowing as that is, I still think this room in Indy is such a special, impactful location.
And also, that's one of my favorite pieces of concept art is the angle of the the Jeep going across the bridge with the stone face in the background with the the lightning, the fire coming out of the eye, and the fact that like you said, they chose the map room cue, from Raiders of the Lost Ark to score that moment, and that's kind of takes us back to what I said at the top of the conversation. When you have those moments, because there's any number of them throughout Indiana Jones Adventure, where everything's firing on all cylinders. It looks right. It feels right. It sounds right. You've got that John Williams music playing. In those moments, you are Indiana Jones. And that, for me, that has never worn off in 30 years. I still grin like an idiot whenever I'm on that ride.
I'm the same way. I'm the exact same way. From the ride system to the details to the practical effects, there's no screens, right, for the most part. But it's not, a black box screen attraction. I mean, there are physical fire and smoke and lighting effects that still, and I know it's been updated a little bit since, but still hold up to this day.
Yeah, and I think what you're also describing is the fact that the illusion is seamless. Mm-hmm. You can look up at the ceiling. You can look all around you in every direction, 360 degrees. The illusion does not break. You are in that temple. And I think, again, that speaks to what Disney has always done best, which is take you out of your theater seat and put you right in the middle of the action. And it's never been more true than with Indiana Jones Adventure.
And I remember when this opened, this was a huge deal. Like, not just in the parks and the ceremony with red carpet and all the executives, but it really was sort of a Hollywood opening. There's a lot of celebrity, Arnold Schwarzenegger's there, Carrie Fisher, Dan Aykroyd,
James Earl Jones,
Tony Danza, right? Who I think was standing next to James Earl Jones. But there was also a TV special. They did the making of Disneyland's Indiana Jones Adventure, hosted by Michael Eisner. Probably James Earl Jones was there as well. There was a Super Bowl promotion with when Indy appears. This is when Super Bowl halftime shows used to be good, but I digress. Indy appeared in the halftime show, like rescuing the Lombardi Trophy. Like, this was not just a major capital investment, but Disney was all in on Indy.
And I believe Indy had a nipple slip as well, which is what inspired the Janet Jackson incident years later. No, you're right. And it also kind of speaks to the confluence of Hollywood and themed entertainment. And also, I think it started the boulder rolling to where we are now, which, just like in film, themed entertainment is very IP driven, in that if you're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars, with apologies to project management in 1995, you want to make sure that it's going to be a home run and appeal to the broadest possible audience. And I think you really started to see that with things like Star Tours and Indiana Jones, and even the Twilight Zone Tower of Terror, because when that opened, Twilight Zone was still an iconic show that a lot of people know. And if they don't know the show, they certainly know the phrase. But I think in the late 80s, early 90s was when you started to see this immersion in popular IP that continues to this day. And if anything, it's gotten more prevalent, more intense.
Yeah, and I think that, and look, we could talk for hours about just this attraction, but I think what it did was, one, you design a queue that's almost as legendary as the attraction itself. You create an entirely new vehicle and system that is ideal for this type of storytelling. That's obviously relatively easy to rinse and repeat and use in other shows and attractions as well. Something that is innovative. It is dynamic. I think there's also this wonderfully delicate and I think perfect balance of thrills with storytelling. And my guess, Jason, is that there are so many elements of this attraction, like those things, that still continue to influence design today.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, you just mentioned the combination of thrills and storytelling. That's what Raiders of the Lost Ark was. That's what all of the Indiana Jones films are, because the story was just as important as the Saturday morning serial thrill and adventure aspect of it. Going after the Lost Ark, the Shankara Stones, the Holy Grail. They were just iconic legends, that they were using as a vehicle, no pun intended, to have this rousing Indiana Jones adventure. And that's what that attraction does. And I do think that had a huge influence on blockbuster thrill rides ever since. I know Indiana Jones Adventure was what inspired me with the Jurassic World adventure that I worked on for Universal Studios Beijing. And it was a similar situation in that I went to management and leadership and said, I want to take the Spider-Man vehicle, but not have it be in a screen-based attraction and use it in a practical environment with real dinosaurs. And sort of the mantra of the team was, this is our Indiana Jones adventure with dinosaurs. Mm-hmm. So it was personally influential to me in that way, and something that I got to work on later, also based on a Steven Spielberg property. But to your point, it really sort of set a template that we continue to see to this day. You also mentioned Rise of the Resistance and how they share this jaw-dropping moment. And I love the fact that that exists. And one is Star Wars and one is Indiana Jones. And I love the fact that they live under the same roof and that we're going to have all of these experiences to come, much like we talked about earlier when a new version of Indiana Jones Adventure opens at Animal Kingdom. I'll be there on opening day.
Well, first, that Spielberg guy, I agree. I think he has a bright future ahead of him.
Yeah, he's going places, that one.
Right. But we already did see, pun accidentally intended, we already did see another iteration of this attraction when Indiana Jones Temple of the Crystal Skull opened in what I will argue is the best of the best of the best of Disney parks around the world, but I digress. In September 2001, we go to Tokyo Disney Sea, and we get this new Indiana Jones adventure. And while it uses the same ride system, it's a completely different temple, a different story, different effects. This is set in the Central American jungle. And again, I think it's one of the most visually stunning and intense experiences in any Disney parks. I think the queue is just spectacular. Like, I don't want to priority pass my way through. Like, I want to just savor and take in this queue. Let's just quickly talk about how this version compares and why some people say it might be the best. I think one of the reasons why they say that is because it's not connected in any way to the 2008 film, which is a saving grace. There is no Shia LaBeouf is bouncing anywhere, but instead now you're with Paco, who's Indy's assistant, who accidentally awakens this crystal skull curse. But it is, like I said, Jason, it is the same but completely different.
Yeah, putting myself in peril, I will once again say I liked the 2008 film. I have certain issues with it, like everybody does, but it's still a hell of an Indiana Jones adventure, no pun intended. But, we talked just a couple of minutes ago about this confluence of story and thrill. So with Indiana Jones at Tokyo Disney Sea, you've got arguably the same thrill element in that it's the same ride system, and yet a completely different story that allowed the Imagineers to take it to a completely different part of the world, to your point, Central America as opposed to India. And then at Animal Kingdom, we already know it's going to be the centerpiece of the South American area. So it's going to do it again. And what's fascinating to me, it just shows the flexibility of Indiana Jones as a property, that you can take what's essentially the same physical experience, and you can even mix that up with different ride layouts and different programming, of course. But at the end of the day, it's roughly the same thrill experience. And yet the story and the environment can be completely different. And it will allow you, one day you'll be able to go, much like Indiana Jones himself, you'll be able to go all around the world to all these different temples and have a completely different experience every time. And I just think that, as a middle-aged man who grew up with Indy at 11, 14, and 19, it's just mind-boggling to me that you could actually now do what Indiana Jones did. Mm-hmm. Get on a plane, have that red line take you across the globe to a completely far-flung different location, and have an all-new adventure.
Yeah, and it is, it's not just one of the most immersive rides in sea. I think a lot of people consider it superior to the original because of the lighting, because of the effects, maybe even pacing in some places. I think it very much demonstrates Disney's commitment to creating international variations It's not just let's just copy it and paste it somewhere else. And, it makes me wonder about, what Oriental Land Company did and continues to do there. And I joke saying, this is what happens when you give Imagineering unlimited budget and say, just go do what you do best. And I think about sort of wonder what freedoms they had in terms of designing and creating this story for it. And I think it speaks volume about the execution of storytelling at a global scale.
Yeah, it's funny to me because it also, we talked about the variable experience and getting frustrated, like, oh, I wanted to get this version, not that version. Now we've taken that, to your point, to an international scale, where if you want to experience everything, it goes well beyond Anaheim, and now I've got to go to Tokyo, and then I've got to go to Florida now. And it's just amusing to me that we're now at that scale of globe-trotting adventuring. It's definitely hard on the pocketbook. But I love the fact that they have literally replicated the globe-trotting quality of Indiana Jones at this point. And, I can't wait to see what they do at Animal Kingdom. And the other thing that I'm looking forward to is, and this has been something that's recurred in this conversation as well, I just want to be there. I want to live in that Indiana Jones world for a while. And I think, that's what we're going to see at Animal Kingdom, because as wonderful as it is, Indiana Jones Adventure in Anaheim is one component of Adventureland. But at Animal Kingdom, it's going to have, I think, even more of a footprint, more of a presence, more of an opportunity to immerse yourself in the globe-trotting world of Indiana Jones. And as we've been saying for this whole conversation, that is incredibly aspirational for people. You want to do that. You want to live what you've seen on the screen.
Well, I think we want, and have gotten over the years, we've gotten to experience that because they've built out the Indiana Jones world beyond the four corners of the attractions, right? So if we sort of look globally at some of the other ways we've seen Indy in the parks, right? So in Disneyland, it was part of the 50th anniversary Remember Dreams Come True fireworks show. There was the Outpost of Mara in Adventureland, which has since closed. Over at Disney's Hollywood Studios, we had the Adventure Outpost, which is sometimes operational. It was a Dial of Destiny pop-up shop for a while. You've got Indy merch there. You've got the tank outside. It was obviously in the Great Movie Ride. And there's all of these little places that you could sort of get that Indy fix that you want. And I think one of the best places that you can still do it, and it's reason enough to go if you are an Indy nerd, is over at Jock Lindsay's Hangar Bar.
Absolutely. And I was fortunate enough to be involved with that project. And that was definitely the guiding principle. It's like, oh my gosh, we have an opportunity to make an Indiana Jones location that fabled third place that we all want to go to. Everyone wants to have a clubhouse. Everyone wants to have a hangout. And Jock Lindsay's has been that for me. I mean, not only was I fortunate enough to work on it, but it is actually a place I go to pretty much every time I'm at Disney Springs because, again, it's aspirational. You're walking into an environment that you feel like Indiana Jones walked into. And according to our mythology, he did. And you get to be part of that world for a while and have a drink. And again, it taps into that mythic aspect of the character, the aspirational quality. And it came about, the origin story still makes me laugh because I was part of the Disney Springs team for a while. We went through any number of concepts in terms of what that redevelopment was going to be. And for a period of time, that location was actually going to be Trader Sam's, and we were going to blow it out a little bit from Disneyland. So we came up with a new storyline, a new environment that would enable us to expand Trader Sam's so that you could serve a few more guests per hour, get that HMC up a little bit. But we tried to divide it up in these rooms so that we could still preserve the intimacy of Trader Sam's at the Disneyland Hotel. And then not too far into development, we got word that, no, that was going to go to the Polynesian, so you guys need to think of something else. So former Imagineer Theron Skis, who was my partner at Hollywood Studios at the time and who has a wonderful new book coming out, Creating Memorable Worlds, all about themed entertainment. We were partners on that. and we started brainstorming a story about this grizzled riverboat captain. I was inspired, not unlike Harper Goff, by The African Queen. So I took the notion of Humphrey Bogart from that movie. And then I told one of our concept artists, I said, look at Humphrey Bogart in The African Queen. Look at Cary Grant in Father Goose, where he plays kind of this grizzled, guy piloting this rickety boat through the South Pacific, with the scruff. Very much a departure for Cary Grant. And what would George Clooney look like in that kind of costume, that kind of look with the scruff and the kind of grizzled, world-weary, I've seen everything. So we developed this whole new storyline for that character, this riverboat captain, and he was going to be part of the Society of Explorers Adventurers, so we were going to expand that mythology. And I will never forget, Theron and I were in the conference room out at Flower Street in Glendale pitching to Tom Staggs, who was the head of Parks and Resorts at the time. So we get through this whole pitch, this whole mythology, this whole story, and Tom goes, well, yeah, but people aren't going to know who that guy is. And we're like, well, yeah, but they'll learn. And that's part of the myth making. That's part of the world building that we're doing. And it's part of what sea is. And he goes, well, why don't you just build it around that guy that flew Indiana Jones around? And I'm not easy to shock and surprise in an environment like that. But this, I would have paid to see the look on my face, because it's probably like, and I go, Jock? And he goes, yeah, Jock, the guy with the snake, the guy that flies Indiana Jones around. And I said, so you're telling me that you think we should take this concept and build it around a secondary character from one of the Indiana Jones films? He's in the movie for 3 minutes. Yeah, let's make it all about Jock. And I said to him, because I'm not always known for my judgment, I said, okay, now if I had come in here with that idea, right. You would toss me right out that window. But because you came up with it, it's genius. But it turned out to be genius. And I worked directly with Lucasfilm, traded all sorts of emails and phone calls with Pablo Hidalgo, who's one of their Jedi masters in terms of the story keeping and myth keeping department, part of the story group. And we worked out a timeline. We figured out exactly where Jock was at any point in time from like the 30s to the 50s. And we cobbled together this story in which Jock flew Indy up and down the Florida Peninsula looking for the Fountain of Youth. In fact, in the bar, we have a framed photo of the two of them in front of that goofy attraction in St. Augustine. And Jock's like, and Indy's got this, irritated look on his face. But the idea was that they came to Florida looking for the Fountain of Youth. Jock was really taken with this little town, the Springs, and following his sort of retirement, he settled there, built an air hangar, and started doing charter air tours. And then ultimately, when he retired from that, turned it into a bar, which it remains to this day. But I still have the documents that go year by year and say, okay, he was in South America at this time, he was here at this time, he was here, he was here. This is when he went to Florida with Indy. This is when he came back to Florida. This is when he opened the air hangar. And this is when the air hangar turned into a bar. And yes, I do need mental help.
No, dude, I dig the fact that there is this lore and legacy and backstory that no guest ever sees or hears, and some of them probably don't care about, but that you build this world around this bar and just the name that you are going to put on it, that maybe not every everyday guest that comes in even knows who Jock Lindsay is or gets the Indiana Jones reference, but it's gold for those of us who go and we see, the references to Club Obi-Wan throughout and all the pun-filled drinks and the menu items, and because there's a lot of
dolls are on the wall and
because there's so many different crossovers between Indy and Star Wars and the Lucasfilm universe. Little THX 1138 with the
there's a lot of Rocketeer references in there, which people seem to love.
I do love me some. Yeah. I have Rocketeer to show you. I have an unopened pack of Rocketeer trading cards sitting on my desk. So
you ought to set that on the toilet tank, because you seem dead set on turning your bathroom into an interesting environment. So instead of a newspaper, you've got Rocketeer trading cards on your toilet.
Yeah, we'll, you know what? I'm going to put you on the spot. We'll have to go to Jock's one day, or maybe we'll do like a live show from Jock's one night.
Yeah, that'd be great.
We'll eat and drink. We'll do a little tour of Jock's.
And if we can time it, we can bring Fred Sorensen in, who played Jock, because this is a funny story. When we started developing Jock's, I actually tracked him down online. I think it was on LinkedIn. And somehow I got a phone number, and I called and I go, is this Fred Sorensen? Yes, this is Jock. And then I explained who I was and what I was doing, and he was just tickled pink. And the whole point was to get family photos and things like that from him that we could either incorporate into the attraction or use, for likenesses and things like that. We never quite took that to the level that I think would have been super fun. But he is absolutely tickled that he's got this place, and he does fly for a living, and he's in Orlando somewhat regularly, and he always goes to Jock's where he holds court. They have events out there, and he's just beloved, and you can see it on his face. It's like never would have expected this to happen. And I remember the first time I took my son Jake with me to meet him. He was much younger. He was probably only 3 or 4, and he was acting very shy around Fred. And then, God love him, Fred goes, "Come on, Jake, show a little backbone, will you?" And I'm like, "You have no idea what you're experiencing right now."
It's one of those moments like, you need to remember this moment for the rest of your life. He's like, "What are you talking about, Dad?"
This is important. He used a quote that was in context.
You know what? I'm sure years from now, you're going to love the fact that your son is going to tell that story to his kids and make you out to be dad of the millennium.
I have tried. I try to take him on my adventures. He's my short round.
I am sure he looks up to you probably way more than he even lets on.
Yeah, mostly because of the height difference. But,
right. Let's just quickly sort of as we sort of come full circle, we've talked about so much that is here and has been here. And obviously the future of Indy in the parks is very, very exciting with the new Tropical Americas expansion replacing Dinoland USA in fall of 2027. This 11-acre expansion that is going to include things like Encanto and a carousel, and nobody cares. It's all about Indiana Jones. It is all about Indiana Jones It's going to feature a brand new story, separate and distinct from the Stunt Show and the Temple of Forbidden Eye and Crystal Skull and Temple of Peril. It's about discovering this preserved Mayan temple that's supposed to house a mythical creature, probably going to involve snakes, some supernatural stuff, really going to fit in this idea of Animal Kingdom's ongoing theme of exploration. Again, blending that narrative with the environmental immersion, using the EMVs, the enhanced motion vehicles, once again. We've seen some concept art, sort of that Maya archaeology, that multi-storied Mayan temple in the lush, overgrown jungle. What are your thoughts about this attraction, the setting, etc.?
I think it's Indiana Jones is a wonderful and very organic addition to Animal Kingdom. If it's not going to go into Adventureland, man, Disney's Animal Kingdom is the place for it. And the idea that it's going to be an anchor for a South American area, which is literally the first place we met Indiana Jones, although, in Peru, in Raiders of the Lost Ark. But South America, and even when you're talking about the much maligned by Lou Mongello, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, that too is South American. I just think it's incredibly exciting. And while my daughter will be thrilled, I won't be talking about Bruno. I will be talking about Indiana Jones when this new area opens, because I just could not be more thrilled that one of my favorite characters in all of pop culture is finally going to get his due here at Walt. Well, not the Stunt Show's not great, but get this entire themed area where you can truly live that life, for a little while, and just could not be more excited about it.
Well, because I know for years, those of us who are Indiana Jones fans, there were rumors swirling about Echo Lake becoming part of a larger, this is pre-Galaxy's Edge, right? Part of a larger Lucasfilm land, or part of a larger Indiana Jones expansion, a new Indy ride coming here. We never got those things, and now that we get this, I think there's so much excitement for Indy and Lucas fans, and I love the fact that Indy continues to be part of Disney's future IP strategy, and being able to leverage, and not just leverage the technology that's already there, but being able to plus it up as we expect them to do, but also have the opportunity to create a brand new storyline without the confines of either having to repeat something that's there or base it on one of the films.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why one of the reasons I'm thrilled that Disney acquired Lucasfilm, because now they not only is it a popular character, popular IP, but it's Disney. So now they have skin in the game, so they have, motivation to keep this character, this world front and center. And then I also love that through the mythical creature that will allegedly be part of the storyline, and I don't have any inside secrets, so I'm speculating like anybody else, but that's going to check that Animal Kingdom box of mythical creatures, because that was always part of the park's charter, was that it was going to be animals, real, imagined, prehistoric, and obviously prehistoric's going away, but this will allow them to really check that animals from our imagination box, and using Indiana Jones to do it, I think is just a master stroke, because it's a double whammy. It's a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love your perspective on this, Jason, because you really, you understand intimately both the creative side and the operational side, and looking at not just the ongoing success and the continued viability of Indy as sort of a long-term franchise in the parks, even with no, there's no announcement of another film coming up or no announcement of a Disney Plus series or anything else like that. Disney sees that this character who's become so much a part of our, of the zeitgeist of adventure fans. And I think, Indy's not just a character. He's a little bit of, I think he's that invitation for us to adventure and mystery and danger and discovery that is now become multi-generational, right? And now for more than 30 years, the parks have allowed us to step into that world. And I am very, very excited for what is coming to Disney.
I love that you referred to it that way, because Indiana Jones as a character is in and of himself a call to adventure. And call to adventure is one of the most important steps in the hero's journey, which is part of the monomyth, which takes us back to George Lucas and Joseph Campbell and that sort of mythic storytelling. It also takes us back to that, I think it's Jungian concept of the collective unconscious. And I think that the longer he is part of our world and part of our pop culture, and again, we're talking about 40 plus years now in terms of Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones himself is now part of our collective unconscious. And I think that is what's going to guarantee his continued thriving in all media. Because I don't think I don't think Disney will be done with Indiana Jones anytime soon. And I know Harrison Ford is about to turn 83, which gives me palpitations. Because I told my wife on several occasions, I'm like, I'm going to have to be sedated if anything happens to him, because that's going to be a tough one to recover.
Harrison Ford for Geritol. But I think there's really, I said this at the beginning, and I think it comes full circle, thanks to Walt and people like you, Jason Surrell, the stories that we love to watch and just want to watch over and over again are not ones that we just get to experience on screen. They are ones that we get to live in. I so much appreciate not just your contributions, what you have brought to storytelling and these immersive, interactive experiences in the parks, but spending and sharing some time with us today. If people want to connect with you, find you, other than the multitude of books that you have written over the years, where can they find you online?
I'm on Facebook and LinkedIn. I don't have a huge presence. I don't have an Instagram account or anything like that. I think I'm too old. But yeah, you can find me on Facebook and LinkedIn. And then based on an interview I read with James Gunn this morning, I think I might take a shot at Threads. But yeah,
you can also go to my Jason Surrell fan page. I'll link to it. In the,
I would appreciate it. And then I think this sounds horrible to say, but if you Google me, there's some cool videos that come up of some panels I've done where I talk about my career and stuff like that. So I'm out there, unfortunately.
I was going to say, you're out there, all right, but I don't want to insult you because I mean that as a compliment. And you are making your debut at Momentum this fall. I cannot wait. You're going to share a presentation on storytelling, and I am so grateful for your willingness to come and be part of that. I know a lot of people are excited to have you there.
Yeah, I'm honored to be asked and can't wait to be part of it. Looking forward to it.
All right, last question for you. What is your favorite Indy attraction, Easter egg moment, whatever it is, in a Disney park?
I don't know that it's an Easter egg, but you've actually already mentioned it. My favorite moment is that big reveal in the center of the Temple of the Forbidden Eye. It never fails to dazzle me, and it's always been a goosebump moment because, for all intents and purposes, in that moment, you are Indiana Jones.
Very well said. I love it. I love you, like not in the same way that you love Harrison Ford, but it's getting there. Jason Surrell, thank you so very much for being here.
Thank you for having me. Looking forward to next time.
You call him Dr. Jones, dog.
It's time for our Walt Disney World Trivia Challenge, where you can test your knowledge to see how well you know the magic, memories, and hidden treasures of Disney. You can test your knowledge, and if you enter and answer correctly, you have a chance to win a Disney prize package. And this week's trivia contest is once again brought to you by you, the most important part of WDW Radio, because by joining the WDW Radio Nation, you're not only helping to support the podcast, live shows, and events, but you're becoming part of the magic that makes it all possible. And for as little as $1 per month, you unlock exclusive perks like scavenger hunts, group calls, a private community, surprise care packages from the parks, and much more. More importantly, your support helps power our Dream Team project, which has raised more than $550,000 to help grant Make-A-Wish trips to children with life-threatening illnesses to bring a little bit of Disney magic to families that need it most. If you want to be part of something bigger, to be part of the magic, you can join us today over at www.radio.com/support. I love and appreciate your support, friendship, and help, and I love being able to give back and say thank you each and every month. I want to quickly thank some of the new and longtime members of the Nation family, including Michael Laverdiere, Katrina Kenny, Steve Sturgeon, Casey Potts, and Faye Edmondson. Again, to learn more and become a member of the Nation, visit www.radio.com/support. Now, before we get to this week's question, let's go back, review last week's, and select our winner. So last week, and who am I kidding? Every week I am in a Japanese mood after we came back from our adventures by Disney in Japan. And one of my favorite places to eat in all of Walt Disney World is Shikisai, which is a Japanese izakaya or gastropub. And I was talking about how this location didn't open until August 2023. In fact, this is not the first, nor shall it be the last, but it's the third restaurant in this spot. And I'm not talking about Teppan Edo in the back of the second floor, because Shikisai replaced Tokyo Dining. But your question last week was to tell me the name of the original restaurant that once occupied this space when Epcot opened in 1982. First, thanks to so many of you who entered, got this one correct, shared some memories of visiting when this was known as Tempura Kiku. And this was the tempura bar up in the Mitsukoshi restaurant in Japan that opened on October 1st. They had seafood and vegetables and chicken and beef battered in that crisp tempura style, and it became Tokyo Dining in 2007, and then eventually Shikisai in 2023. So I took all the correct entries, randomly selected one, and last week you were playing for the WDW Radio keychain, stickers, pin, vinyl sticker, and a mystery prize, or two, that I brought back from Japan. It might be from one of the cities that we visited in Japan. Maybe it's from Tokyo Disneyland or Disney Sea. If you are the winner, you're going to find out soon, because last week's winner, randomly selected, is Daniel Scott. So Daniel, congratulations. Your prize package is well wrapped and on its way. And if you played last week and didn't win, that's okay, because here's your next chance to enter in this week's Walt Disney World Trivia Challenge. So since we're talking about Indiana Jones, let's stay with Indiana Jones. Tell me, what is the name of the interactive mobile game, you might not even realize that it's there, that you can still play in the queue for the Indiana Jones Adventure at Disneyland? This is the mobile game that you can play on your phone, not the interactive translation game with the Maraglyphs on the card, but the game you can play on your phone. What is it called? You have until Sunday, June 29th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern to go to www.radio.com, click on this week's podcast, And this week, you're going to play for a prize package that includes a WDW Radio keychain, stickers, the vinyl laptop sticker, a WDW Radio pin, and another mystery prize. So good luck, don't look into the eyes of Mara, and have fun. That's going to do it for this week's show. Thank you again for listening and being part of the WDW Radio family. I am so grateful for you, and I hope you found a little bit of magic and a little bit of fun, maybe something you have never learned or heard before on this week's podcast. Thanks to everyone who came out for our Meet of the Month this past weekend in the Japan Pavilion. Stay tuned to the events page over at www.radio.com for our next Meet of the Month in Walt Disney World, maybe in Disneyland. I'm going to be in Disneyland a lot throughout July. We have 2 group Adventures by Disney trips. I'm going to be out there for a few extra days to do a little bit of other work, so maybe we'll do a meetup there. Again, stay tuned to the events page at www.radio.com/events. Please don't forget to connect and chat with me on social. I am at Lou Mongello. And sign up for my free weekly newsletter and updates over at www.radio.com. I've got some pretty cool things I'm going to be sharing through the newsletter very, very soon, so don't miss a thing. In the meantime, don't forget, if you enjoyed the show, please help spread the word, share it with a friend, be kind, choose the good, have a great day, and even better tomorrow. So until next time, I love and appreciate you. See ya.
Not bad for tourists. Now, stay out of trouble, will ya?